Ba-bang.
Cool.
I don't think I've ever done ba-bang before. That's my new thing now, I guess. We'll see how long that
Catchphrase.
lasts.
Yeah.
How you doing, Drake?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm magnificent, we're headed into the holidays. I love Christmas. I'm a big Christmas guy.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, do you really? I feel like so many artists, it's a very what's the term? Polarizing thing among
That's true.
artists. A lot of artists are
Yeah.
like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, I think it's at least for me.
Musicians too. You grew up playing music, man. You gotta hate.
Yeah. Oh, well, there are certainly aspects of every person who would like me to make a lot of money suggests a Christmas album around this time every year where they're like, you should make one of those and you'll make, $1 million or something doing a classical guitar Christmas record, which no shade. I mean, I listen to some of them, but the same suggestion every year does get a little
taxing.
Yeah.
Artistically, if not otherwise.
But there's something kind of nice about, having like a reserved magical month or something,
Yeah. Well, and you know what's gross about it, buddy, is I hate the thing that everyone hates about Christmas is kind of the thing I love the most about it, which is totally the American commercialism about it. I love the go out and buy shit. Here's all the new ads we made. I hate ads. I'm like one of those people. I pay extra on every streaming service, no matter what it costs to kill them. But I love Christmas commercials. I love the family coming down and he gives it a little diamond. Even the cheesy ones. I just like that shit. I get fuzzy about it. I don't know. And I love the fact that all the stores put out lights and they play the songs and I like all of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a nice thing about I'm sort of excited about this idea of ritual, like coming back and doing the same kind of thing. I mean, I grew up going to a Methodist church, and the like most magical service in that church was always the Christmas Eve service because it was like dim lighting and everyone was holding candles the best part of the year together, and it was like, yeah, it was this very like it like made me understand a lot more about why people feel so like so at home in places like that. It's just like this sort of constant familiar ritual that I think is comforting.
Well, let's lay down
the thing that you're. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I want to lay down some roots before we get too far away. We're talking about this Methodist church. Where is it? Where are you from, bud?
Oh, I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
You're a Winstonian.
I'm a Winstonian. I am.
I
was born
love
in Forsyth
that,
Hospital,
man.
baby.
I adore that. It is absolutely wild, man. I have come to have such an interesting relationship with that city, which I'm sure you do as well, having gone to this school for high school and college, which of course we're going to get into. Sure. One of my best friends was in my wedding party, is Dave Thomas Brown, who is drama school, my age, but ahead of me because I went late. And one of my best friends from school, he's from Winston, and he had that experience as well. He did the drama high school program senior year, and then also did 4 years of college. So Winston until 22 years old, which is, I would imagine, your experience as well.
Yeah, that was we moved briefly to a suburb of Charlotte. My dad was an aircraft mechanic.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so he ended up working for US Air in the Charlotte airport for a few years, and then moved back when I was like 9. So there was a brief few years where I wasn't, but I was born here and most of my formative years were here.
Let's be honest, I'm from Texas, which is a state that is gigantic, and it is it is regionally very different. You can travel like 10 hours, still be in the state and feel like you're in another country.
Sure.
North Carolina is not really like that. It is diverse left to right, east to west. You definitely from beach to mountain. But I mean, even that's not that impressive if I'm being honest, because I live in California now, beach to mountain, a quarter of the time that it takes.
Yeah. And the mountains are bigger.
And absolutely true.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that I love about hearing this is you would think, in a place like North Carolina, where a lot of people make the argument that there's not a lot to do. I mean, talk to someone who's from like New York City that chose to go to school in Winston.
And
culture shock is, of course you do. We all do. We all knew those people. And it's a culture shock for them. They're like, this place is slow. To had the kind of almost choice to leave town, which I imagine you sort of did, to go to another school somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
that didn't happen. What do you love about staying in town? Or was it just that School of the Arts was that attractive to you that you're like, fuck, I guess I'll deal with 4 more years of
Well, Winston. I did go somewhere else for graduate school. And I think so it was sort of a delayed thing. I did a 2-year master's degree at Yale in classical guitar performance, and then moved to New York, and then the pandemic happened, and I'm actually back in Winston now.
Okay, full circuit.
So, but yeah, it was. So I think, and Winston is a strange. It's been changed a lot even since, every time I would make my drive in my poor little Honda Civic all the way from Connecticut to Winston in a day.
I was just there
like this. Really?
Yeah, I was just there for that homecoming thing they did.
Oh yeah.
Fall. Yeah.
It's I mean, it's every time I would come back, it would be like a totally different. Like it's growing kind of crazy.
I like it now, man. I gotta say, Stephen Kopp and I, he's my co-producer on the show. We graduated together. We both had, I don't know how we could count the number of times we've been back since graduation, which was 10 years ago, like less than one hand's worth each.
Yeah.
And both of us hadn't been there in a long time since our last time. And so we both remarked on that. Like, it just feels like a totally different city, which is weird because it also feels like the same city. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a lot of the things that I liked about it are the same, but there's a little more to do now. And I also think that when people are here, having never lived on campus, like I lived with my folks. I actually lived with my family through college at UNCSA and lived like totally across town. And didn't have the curfew in high school. All my friends would have to go up to the dorms, and I could practice till 2 a.m. if I wanted to.
Right.
I think a lot of people that were here just for school and like maybe didn't have a car because the public transportation's not the best, and like didn't really have the same experience because they weren't really talking so much about Winston as they were about like the area just outside of the School of the Arts.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because you forget, and that is such a great point. And people don't realize this because it's not a huge place. But when I brought my wife, and she's from California, and she's never been in North Carolina at all, and I brought her to Winston, and we were talking. I was just throwing out the idea theoretically. I was like, what if we ever lived here? What would you think about that? Like, could you live in a place like this? And we're driving around Washington Park, and we're driving around downtown, and she's like,
yeah.
And then later I took over by like Haynes Mall, Stratford, over on the commercial side of town. I was like, this also has, like, we have stores and stuff here too. It's not it feels like a completely different place all of a sudden.
Totally.
If you don't know that stuff is there, also the east side of town, like there's a lot to the city.
Well, and people know that about big cities. Like when I lived in New York after the pandemic, I lived in like on the line between Bushwick and Bed-Stuy, and I worked in the middle of Manhattan at Lincoln Center. So I was like going underground and coming up in a different city. Like there was I didn't even see the transition. And people know that about LA and New York, and they sort of, people that don't think about cities that they haven't heard of, I think, don't realize that they can also be kind of sprawling. I mean, I had between my 2 years of graduate school, a friend of mine from Yale came back with me just to see Winston for a week or so when I was here on summer break. And, it was very obvious that she was like surprised by how much she liked the town and had never even been to this part of the country. So even though we intellectually, I think, know that there's like a lot of very diverse places and they're very interesting places everywhere, subconsciously we kind of have this idea that the media stereotype of wherever it is we're going is probably more true than not. And
but a lot of the places are boring though, Drake, because I've done this research on some other towns, and when you start digging, you're like, this is it.
Well, I kept getting this feeling whenever I talked to somebody and told them where I was from, that they have got an image in their head of me like sitting on a porch of a house in the middle of a field with a piece of straw sticking out of my mouth. Which sounds lovely. Kansas. I'm not gonna lie, I would love to do that for a few days, but I think that the assumption about I have indeed still experienced rush hour as someone who wasn't from
there's traffic
Chicago
where I'm
or New York. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so let's get some foundation here because I'm very interested how one decides to throw their eggs in the classical guitar basket. What's your family dynamic like? Siblings, parents, what are they
Yeah,
doing
so
for work?
my I have one brother and my parents, so it was a four-person sort of stereotypical unit.
Oh, nice.
I
That's a
have
good
one
size,
younger
man.
brother, and he's a computer scientist, and then I have he's a an artist as well, but he draws. And then I have my dad was an aircraft mechanic for a really long time. It was a big
Right, you
industry
mentioned that.
thing. And then my mom is kind of does everything. She was always this. She was staying at home when we were younger, and then, I mean, she did biology, like cultures for the hospital, and she like worked at H&R Block and did taxes, and she
Does
was the manager
aircraft
of the youth
mechanic
chorus.
pay
Like,
pretty good? Is that why mom can
it
kind of
did,
play
yeah.
around?
Well, it was more that, like, um my dad had this one very big interest and had like stayed up and gone to like night school and stuff to like, or
Right.
worked at night to like work himself up to like being certified, and was a lead mechanic,
He went to like
and
trade
was really
school.
yeah, and was very really into it. And his dad, my grandfather, was also worked for Delta and then Piedmont Airlines. It was like a family thing. And
Got
my
it.
mom is just sort of a really versatile person. And so she was able to get these gigs doing things that were really fascinating and interesting. And none of them were like a thing that she was like, this is my career and I must spend my time doing this. So it was
Interesting.
easier for her to be the one to stay home when we were younger. And then when we were old enough that she wanted to go get a job again, she was like the manager of the Winston-Salem Youth Chorus. You know, she
Wow.
like found these really interesting things to do.
Is mom the reason you're musicy?
Dad was the one that played guitar. Mom played
Okay.
flute a little bit, but not as much around the house. My dad loved playing like folk guitar around the house, and I fell in love with it really, really early, to the point where like I was not big enough to play the smallest guitar that they could find when I wanted to learn. So they like got me violin lessons for like a year and a half. And then when I was like 4 or 5, they found a guitar
Damn.
small enough. So
Violin
yeah,
at 4?
yeah, I mean, those Suzuki kids start early.
Holy shit, dude.
So I was really into it from a young age, and I had this it was kind of weirdly serendipitous because UNCSA, my parents were kind of like, hey, if you study classical, you could it was at the time the high school program was free.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I was
Yeah.
homeschooled because we had moved a little bit, and
Had you ever gone to public school or
I
private
went
school
there
before?
for I went to public school for elementary school, and then in 4th grade I started being homeschooled because we had moved enough that we were going to have to end up in a
So
couple of
you had
schools in the same
grown up
year.
at home. And then where is
Yeah.
your social activity coming
So
from
we
outside?
did a lot of the extracurriculars. I was in community theater. I was in youth
yeah.
chorus. I was my brother did Boy Scouts. Like we found
So
these
you went to a
things that
Methodist church? Was there stuff at
Yeah.
church?
There was some stuff at church. I ended up actually being the contemporary music director of that church when I was in college.
What does contemporary music director mean? I know
so
what music
they-
director is.
They often have a couple of services, and one of them is a traditional service with an organ, and the other one is a contemporary service that has like anywhere from sort of your stereotypical Christian rock stuff to some kind of
you're just the modern
folks
guy.
thing.
You're the contemporary.
Yeah, I was the
music
modern
guy.
dude.
I got
Well,
that.
and I was very into like using that as a platform to like play interesting folk music.
Are you still involved with the church now?
Not as much. When I left and came back, I didn't pick it up again.
Got it.
As much. I mean, I've been back a few times, but the one of the biggest reasons that I stayed in Winston after the pandemic had kind of settled was that almost all of my extended family is here, and I had some grandparents who were going through some end of life stuff, so it was easier for me to stay here and help take care of them, and they were the ones that were involved in that church, so I spent a lot of time there recently. And I can tell.
Do you consider yourself a person of faith? Or is the church music
fairly
relationship? You know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
Because I personally, and I'll give you a little context, so maybe it's an easier question to answer. It's a big question. So here's what I mean. I am not. I grew up that way, but I'm not now. And I found out fairly young that I did not click with the idea of being at church first. The religion thing in my head was something to sort out later.
Right.
But when I was in high school, I grew up from like 5th grade, I was a drummer. So when I got to high school, it felt like the only opportunities I had to play and practice, since I wasn't allowed to have a kit in my house, was to get hired at a church in a band, because they have instruments.
Oh, that's where a lot of the music gigs are. And I think
and with drummers, they have kits. Like at the church, they'll let you play.
You can just show up. Yeah, it's well, and some of those gigs pay extremely well, and it's a big draw for people that, like you're saying, like don't necessarily have the like impetus to be there otherwise, or the belief or desire to be there otherwise. But it's really interesting to me because I consider myself, I consider it a big part of my identity to have been raised that way. And I get sentimental about some of the old hymns and stuff like that, because it's easy to incorporate that into some of the music that I make. I think that everyone kind of develops their own relationship based on whatever church it was that they went to and what it meant for the people in that church. And I had a remarkably positive experience compared with most of the people that I know my age.
Man, Methodist is pretty chill too.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it, was that it was not I didn't feel as judged, I think, as a lot of people that grow up.
A lot of my parts of my family are Methodist. Yeah.
Going to church. But the funny thing was that at the same time that I was directing the music there, I was the song leader at Temple Emmanuel Synagogue. And the difference
is not the same thing.
No. And the difference in I mean, you know, when they asked me if I would do it, I said, I just so we're clear, I'm not Jewish. And they were like, okay, you know, whatever.
Dude, same thing happened to me.
There was you know, and I would get this a little bit of a fear, because even in the Methodist church, sometimes I felt like people were like expecting me to be like kind of more knowledgeable about, you know, biblical scholarly things, because I was on the stage or at the pulpit and stuff like that. And it felt like a little bit of pressure to kind of know what I was doing. And with the synagogue, they were fully aware that I did not, and that it was totally fine and acceptable. So it was definitely an interesting dichotomy, and like the one place I grew up in and the one place I didn't.
It's like you owed a group of people an awareness, and then the other group you didn't, and so you kind of ended up having the freedom to just like do your thing.
It was very transparent that I was not expected to know Hebrew. I ended up learning a little bit, which I have, I think, since lost. But you know, just because you're there every single Friday night, right? But you were saying something similar happened to you.
Well, something similar happened to me where I got hired as a comedian to play this gig for Pride. And I am bisexual, but I wasn't really out about that at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not gay. And so I got hired to play this gig at like a private mansion in Beverly Hills. And it was clearly going to be like almost entirely gay men. And I was like, and it was for Pride. It was during that week as part of like a whole celebration. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And I was like hired to play this thing on Instagram. They reached out to me on Instagram and they were like, hey, do you want to come do this thing? And it paid incredibly well. And I was like, I'm not gay. And they were like, oh, we don't care about that. Yeah. And I was like, not at all. Like, you don't want to give the gig to a gay guy, like who would really need this money.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it's like, all right, I yeah, okay, I'm bisexual. They didn't know that, and I didn't present that
Sure.
way in any way. So it's like I didn't feel as much of like a fraud.
Sure.
And then when I was at the
Yeah, like
gig, it
you
was
knew
fine.
internally
But
that it was in,
yeah,
like
but it
you were
still
included in
felt
that.
weird
Yeah.
because it didn't feel so. I mean, half of me was like, I feel like I'm taking a job away from somebody else. Another part
Yeah.
of me was like, kid, you need the money, fucking take the gig.
Yeah.
Also, it was like still when I was newer to doing stand up in the long scheme of me spending time doing that. So I was like, it's a gig. Like it's a paid stand up gig, which is like when you're
Totally.
new is fucking insane
Crazy.
to get paid to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah. You're like 10 years, I'm going to pay other people in one way or another to do this shit.
Totally.
And then maybe one day they'll give me $50.
Yeah.
And this was like not $50. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's go. Let's do this
Yeah.
thing. And
Well,
and you're right. Once you get on stage in that environment and the pressure is off because everyone knows everyone let's be honest, everyone knows you're a fraud. So you can just behave the way you want to. Have
well,
fun
and the
with
thing
it.
is, even if you're not like, I didn't feel necessarily like a, you know, I had the sort of like the relationship with religion that I had cultivated as a kid in that Methodist church. But like, there's this kind of like imposter syndrome when you're the one who's supposed to be like leading people.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You're like, I mean, there's, you know, especially as a musician and as like with the classical guitar thing, I felt that in school too, where it was like, I felt very capable in a practice room, but the minute I'm like alone on a giant stage, just like little old me with a guitar and a footstool, it was like, do I know how to do this anymore? You know, I don't feel like I should be the one that's here, you know?
How does it evolve for you as a classical musician? I have a lot of obviously from school and otherwise. Also, my wife was a classical musician in school before she became a therapist. She went to SFCU. SFCM, San Francisco Conservatory of Music.
Right.
She's a singer, and we have a bunch of friends that are classical musicians from her school. It's interesting to me, the path from when you're young, as you're going through the process of practicing what is theoretically and has been historically a lifelong practice of always getting better and becoming the best of whatever you're going to do for that thing. You know, it's not like other skills, I don't think, or even other art forms where it's like you kind of reach a point where it's like you've done a lot of what you're gonna do. I feel like with musicianship, it's like there's always a harder piece to learn how to fucking do that you can't do, that you're pushing yourself towards. But my question is, as you're going through the evolution of being, like you said, 5 and finally getting a guitar or whatever it was, and then going to a focused education, then going, I'm going to stick with this focused education out of high school into college. And then you get out of college and you got to go live your life. How does it evolve your thoughts on where you're going to like make money and have a career and stuff? Because I would imagine when you're 5 and when you're 25, it's not the same feeling. And it changes many times.
I will say it's been kind of cyclical for me because when I was a kid, I was just enamored with making sounds that were cool. You know, like there was start with like, I love that. I want to do it. Oh, I'm doing it and I still love it. And I love that I'm making these sounds and I feel to the point where like it was an extremely useful emotional outlet for me as a kid where I would just like lock myself in my room and play, just like wail on something that I was really into or like experiment and devote my attention to.
What are you working on when you're first playing?
I mean, honestly, my parents had a whole bunch of like concert DVDs and CDs and stuff. And so for the first very long time, I was just learning stuff by ear and by like watching people play guitar on these DVDs. And
like
so it's a bunch of like the examples. Let me try to think of some. They had like Fleetwood Mac. They had like Lynyrd Skynyrd. They had like a Bon Jovi one. They were just like, but my parents were like very into for a while.
Classic
like
rocky. What we would have called classic rock when we were young.
Right. And then, like just I got really into the folk stuff and my dad had a bunch of Cat Stevens and Jim Croce and
you're in a great region for that.
Right. And exactly. And having like Doc Watson and some of the old bluegrass stuff. And that's the stuff that he would play a lot. So I got really into the acoustic stuff. And he was teaching me for a while. I ended up getting a teacher in town. And again, it was this infrastructure thing of like UNCSA's here. So there's a bunch of musicians that graduated and stay here. So you can go study with someone who's awesome and then like get into high school and study with someone else who's awesome. And like, you know, there was this like inbuilt public infrastructure to like get me this thing I wanted really bad.
And what did you want really bad?
I just wanted to play what I wanted to play. And I was really excited about making the music that I wanted to make. And then as I started in high school at UNCSA and the system of like, this is what we do here. And this is like, that's when I think the sort of pressure of expectation started to set in. And that was the most like cynical phase of music making for me, because it was all about like executing something perfectly. And like, I think that I had this, and a lot of people in like late high school, early college classical music, I think have this attitude about them of like, you're sitting in a room full of people who are judging you, and not just in a like productive way. Like it was productive. People were giving you feedback and telling you the things that you could fix in a very like, I would like for you to do this so that it sounds better and doesn't have anything to do with your self-worth kind of way. But at the same time, the social aspect of going to such a small school and having everyone know how quote unquote good you are, because you have to play in masterclass every week in front of everybody. And like, it like introduced this level of anxiety around I realized just classical playing. And
why did you choose classical playing as a major then, if the rigidity of it seemed to kind of be prickly to you?
Well, it was a slow ingest. I loved the music.
Right.
And it was the thing that was here for me to study. Like it was the thing that the institution was here for me to study. And I don't regret studying it. And I still love the music to this day, and play it to this day. I think that the institutional aspect of, at the same time as I was getting better and I was really excited and proud about getting better, and I could play things that I couldn't play before, even in other genres, and make sounds that I really liked. At the same time, it wasn't so much just the rigidity of like, you won't let me do what I want, man, as like this like deep-seated thing that started to attach itself to my self-worth, where if I like messed up a run, I was not as good, and it became like this sort of like this like rotating self-hatred thing. That when I started performing other genres again, when I was in college and started, you know, a band and was like playing with writing music and feeling more secure with writing music, and I played at a bar and I felt like I could have like a beer with me on stage. Sure. And I could like take a sip in between. That was the thing that actually really broke it for me, was this like this feeling that I owned the space again. Yeah. And that I wasn't like walking out trembling trying to impress someone, but in fact, like the people were there to hear me, and they weren't there to like, you know, when I was in grad school, people would literally have the score in their hand and they would be like looking for wrong notes as you were playing, which was like, obviously I see the point of it in terms of practice, but it felt very soul sucking, because I was like, I'm trying to like emotionally move you, which will not happen even if I do play everything correctly, because you're buried in this like right wrong thing. So it was very hard to like divorce those two. And on top of that, starting to write music that wasn't necessarily classical, the division between like the composition students and the performance students being like, everybody was doing everything. Like the composition students can play instruments extremely well, and the instrumental students usually can write pretty well too. But every time you'd ask them about it, oh, I'm not a real composer, I'm not a real singer, whatever it was that they weren't studying, they like weren't allowed to be good at.
Why do you think these feelings, where do you think they come from? Why does everybody feel like there's this rigidity? And is there a way to still teach the level of execution and craft and technique that those people are trying to get out of you without creating that culture?
Well, I think that addressing the just sort of addressing that those feelings can potentially arise is important, because the only time I ever noticed that it was happening was after it had happened.
Got it.
And it was this kind of slow burn thing of like, I can't feel my face when I play classical guitar on stage anymore, and I don't know why, because I used to like, performing, and now I love playing, and I love playing for friends, and I love playing in my practice room, and I love playing outside on a beautiful day. And the second that it's this like, everyone sit down and face me and I'll play, and the room is otherwise totally silent, it's like introduces this anxiety. And I think just addressing the fact that
that's normal.
Yeah. I mean, well, the control of it all, the first masterclass I was in high school, we didn't play. We practiced walking on stage, bowing, sitting down, playing a single chord, bowing, and walking off stage.
Right.
Which is like, and there were like a bunch of things you could screw up. The teacher was like, you got to bow like this, and you got to take this much time.
It's like
and you don't look awkward doing that. And it was like,
something.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm terrified already as like a, 15-year-old. I haven't played a single note,
But do you think there's value in that exercise? Is there a way to get you to do that without you feeling like you're freaking out?
I think that giving notes that make someone want to incorporate them and be critical in a sort of positive, productive way about their own performance, rather than like having the rigidity be the first foot forward. Like I think I remember this one point, and I won't name names, but I was on someone else's senior recital.
Okay.
And she played a wind instrument, and she came backstage and was like, "Is it okay? Do you think it's okay if I have my water bottle on stage with me?" And I was like,
no.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would that not be like that was going to be like, it was going to ruin the performance, or it was going to look unprofessional or something to like have a water bottle and you play a wind instrument. Like you need, it's going to sound better. Like why? And it this flood of realization of like, like I don't feel like I own the space that I'm playing in. I don't feel like I'm there to like deliver this thing that I love. I feel like I'm like walking into a job interview every time I play.
This is very interesting to me. And I think it's an interesting comparison between the different art forms, because obviously I only talk so much about the music program. I've only had so many people. But I just had a conversation with Steven Kopp on his second episode after we went to the homecoming thing, because we observed an acting class on campus while we were there this fall. And it was a second year acting class with Carl Forsman. And it was very reminiscent of when we were there. It felt a lot like the energy that the students had, felt like a lot of the energy that we had or other people had at the time. Not as much us, because we were directors and we were older, but the acting students in our class, I mean, it looked like watching them 100%. It felt very similar. And we were talking about it later, and I kind of gave the analogy of the tough thing about it is that they have this great opportunity where they actually are allowed to screw up in that particular context. That's not a performance, that's a class. And they're making acting choices, which is very different from playing classical music, because there is no interpretation in classical music. There's not that much for you to interpret. There may be a little room for you to be like, how exactly do I handle this dynamic or something? Or what does that volume increase, that crescendo mean in exact decibels? I mean, yeah, there might be some room there. But other than that, it's like you said, it's rigidity. It's play these notes in this time, this way exactly. And it's that perfection that you're kind of going for, which creates an anxiety, of course. Why would it not?
Sure.
To try to be perfect.
It like flies in the face of, because there is a lot of interpretation, I think, but it's very loaded.
But that's not what the teachers seem to be looking for.
Well, you don't get to decide everything, and if you do decide something, someone might tell you that it's like objectively wrong for some historical reason, or so like I think the anxiety is that you do have the ability to make these choices, but that someone can think they're stupid and that you don't want someone to judge you and think that they're stupid.
That helps with my analogy. So we were talking about the acting class, and we were watching them and thinking to ourselves, okay, fully objectively as us as 35-year-olds, we're watching this going, these poor kids have this great opportunity and nothing's changed. It's not like it just dawned on us seeing it as older people. These poor kids have such a great opportunity to fuck up because they're in this rehearsal studio in North Carolina that no one can see them.
Right.
It's okay to make a mistake. Just make a choice.
Yeah.
You have to do something. And a big hurdle that these artists were having in the moment was they were approaching an acting moment and making no choice and just kind of doing it without deciding boldly.
Without
I'm going to make
experimenting.
This.
Yeah,
exactly. And then, that didn't work. Second take, I'm going to go this way, separate direction. And they know the language and they know how to do those things. But there is, like you said, a pressure because they have their acting teacher who is, however they feel about them, XYZ experienced teacher, just like yours, where it's like, he's going to be, here's a specific thing that came up in the class. Me and my wife have still talked about this. There's a moment in the scene where the girl goes to the window of a hospital. Someone's in the hospital bed. They're unconscious. She's kind of milling around the room, and then she goes to the window and she looks out the window. He stopped the scene and he asked the actress, "What are you looking at?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you're looking out a window. What do you see?"
Yeah.
And so she starts trying to kind of guess, and they're really weak choices. Clouds, birds, but. And she says birds at one point, and he just latches on to this and kind of goes on this little mini thing about nobody looks at birds. There are no birds out there. Like look through your whole life of looking out a window, and maybe you see a bird once for a second and it leaves, but you don't watch birds. And his point was that you didn't spend enough time thinking consciously and realistically about a choice to make. And he was pointing that out in front of everybody. But what the entire room got wrapped up in, including us after we left and my wife and I after we got back to California, is, do people fucking look at birds? Is that a fair call out? I mean, and that's not the point.
Yeah, it's not.
But
it's also fun to...
It held up the actors in the class to get caught up on, I don't want to pick a choice that he's going to like tear into me of. No one's ever done that. Yeah. And so they step back from choosing rather than what he would really like them to do, which is go get them to do, pick another thing. Yeah. Birds, bad. Try again. Yeah. This bad, try again. And that's the process. Not
just like try to find something that is well. And I think that
he's pulling them out of their shell and what he would like to do. And I think most artistic teachers would like to do is they want to see you keep trying boldly and not be scared, even if that try is to get something exactly perfect or to come up with a brand new idea.
Well, and the truth is, like, there's no, obviously, I mean, this is sort of a silly philosophical point, but obviously there's no like objective perfection when it comes to any of this stuff, but we're like told to chase it anyway.
Correct.
And what you want is for something to be exactly what you wanted it to be, even if that moment is kind of a forehead slap, like, oh my God, this is, I didn't even think of that, but it's perfect. But like the thing that you're chasing is like something beautiful, not like something right. Necessarily and I think that
is there not beauty in the rightness?
Well, there is no rightness really. I mean, there's some stuff. It's weird because I think there's some stuff that's wrong, but I don't know that there's not like a thing that is right. Does that make sense?
Don't get me wrong. I love the singer from Cake. I love Thelonious Monk. I love people who go, I'm going to fucking not do this. Yeah. Syncopation's my shit. But what I'm saying is when things do align in the way that our brain expects them to, which is a lot of how so much music works, is about expectation and where our brains think it's going to go. And it either kind of goes there or slightly doesn't. But when it breaks the rules hard, like the note is flat, or the thing comes way late, or it just becomes this arrhythmic nothing, our brains don't tend to like it. Those don't become mainstream pop hits. I'm not saying everyone should make mainstream pop hits, but my point is there not something to appreciate in delivering the brain exactly what it thinks it's going to get?
Well, I think the thing is that like not everybody
can be a perfection.
Well, but not a perfection. But I think that's the thing, is that we like not everybody has the same idea of what it is that they want, and what you should be chasing is yours. And the suggestions that other people are making, whether they're teachers or fellow students or people that you decided to play for or show your work to or whatever, is the most amazing epiphanies that I've had in the work are when people have said, I think that you should try this. And it's something that I hadn't thought of at all, but that like was clear. You're looking for the like forehead slap moment of like, of course that's what I should do. That's exactly what this needs. Thank you. I had no idea. Like, it's not this like, oh yeah, I guess I should try it because it is the thing that you're supposed to do. It's like, oh yeah, like this is it now, and I didn't even know that. And you're like sort of chasing this intangible thing. And that's like what I feel like that's what the feedback is for. These like epiphany moments of like, and you know, they feel a little bit less intense later in the game, I think, when you're 18 and you're a freshman in college and your teacher shows you a new hand position and you're like, we solved music. It's all, I fixed it, you know, and you kind of start to realize that that's not exactly what you know, it's not going to change everything, but it's still a valuable epiphany to have. And I think the sort of blessed unrest thing that you were talking about, the like chasing, becomes a lot more exciting when everyone isn't chasing the same thing. Because when you are all trying to be the best possible guitarist in the world, and someone has faster scales than you or whatever, like there is never going to be one of those people, because there are people that are better at certain things and not as good at other things. And like you might have better tone, but she might have a faster scale pattern or what, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that if you're chasing the best musician that you can be, and like the things that you are really excited about executing well are the things that you are chasing, then you're not, it's this sort of classic, like I'm only in competition with yesterday's me thing. And it becomes a lot less soul sucking, I think, because the nice thing about being a classical guitarist was that a lot of that energy does come from the competition circuits and like competing for orchestra seats and stuff that like
that's the shit I've never liked about classical music is the orchestra
and classical
seat
guitarists we were not under any illusion that this was gonna be like a gangbuster's job. You know what I mean? We were
there was for sure. You're not like a violinist in that track, right?
No one was lying to us and being like, all of you are going to get jobs teaching classical guitar, even though, you know, there are a handful of schools who already have teachers, and all of those schools are turning out at least 8 guitarists a year.
Right. The numbers don't make sense.
So it's this thing of like, we already knew that we were going to have to invent whatever it is that we wanted to be. In a way that I think a lot of classical musicians don't get to initially consider until they either get the orchestra job and they love it and they still do that, which is great, or they don't get the orchestra job and they're upset and they have to have that kind of moment of reflection, or they do get the orchestra job and they don't like it. You know, a lot of different things could happen, but I feel like the freedom, especially with doing the church gig and doing the like writing and releasing a classical record and a few non-classical records, made me realize that like I could just be the artist that I was excited about being, and that's what I could chase. And anything that, you know, when someone told me that I was supposed to have a faster scale or I was supposed to be able to do this or that, it was like, I'm in graduate school for classical guitar performance. Like the supposed to ship sailed a long time ago. Like there's no, I'm not doing something that I'm supposed to do already. Why would I start now unless it's in service of a thing that I'm excited about doing? Like if I want to play a piece that's got those scales, I'll work on them and I'm excited about them. But if I'm just supposed to have them for the sake of them, it's not as meaningful to me anymore as it was when my like, you know, 19-year-old college competitive brain was in it a little more and I was more anxious about it.
What do you think the relationship is between, or should be between, someone paying for an education versus trusting the institution to deliver the education that they need? Right? Because it's like there's a dynamic at some institutions where it's like the students don't have any say. Like I would give School of the Arts when I was there kind of that might be a great example of it, because we didn't pick any classes. You don't pick any casting. You don't pick what scenes you want to do for the most part. It's very prescriptive. It's very do this thing and trust that when you're done doing it, you'll be better. It's that simple. Then there's other schools, obviously liberal arts and other experience, but now even more so where it's like, not just you could pick your classes, but at a lot of schools, the students have a tremendous amount of impact on what casting they get or what songs they play or how they're treated in a class by a teacher as far as just language and all these things. There's so much more input, which I think can be very helpful, because we've always had things like professor reviews or feedback at the end of semester. We've always had like shit like that a lot of people don't take seriously. But now it's like, if the whole student population is pissed about something, there's probably going to be a change about it pretty quick. And that didn't used to happen.
Sure.
What do you think are your thoughts on that relationship when you're like paying for someone because you're giving them a shitload of money, but at the same time, if you already knew what you needed to know, you wouldn't be there?
Well, I think that the truth is there is no institution that will ever be perfect for any individual person, right?
Sure.
Like, there is no way that you are going to find a college program that you're like, this is everything that I needed and nothing that I didn't need, because obviously there would be one college for every human on earth if that was the case. So there is no institution that is like going to be what you need 100%. And if you like identify only with what you're doing in that institution, then it's going to be really unfulfilling, because some of it's going to feel like busy work and other stuff is going to feel too hard. And you're going to learn this thing you didn't want to learn, and you're not going to learn this thing you did want to learn, or whatever it is. But treating that institution as like a singular facet of who you are as an artist, and like the things that you are getting from that institution that you want, is very exciting. And whatever you're not getting, you can chase is, I think the way that I started looking at it in graduate school, because I was getting a lot out of graduate school, and also there were things that I felt like I was really missing. And I realized that like seeking those things out other places and not feeling like I was just like identifying myself as a graduate student, and like whatever I didn't get from that school was a shame that I didn't get it.
Do you think that's inherently at war with the idea of a conservatory that's prestigious? Like, it's really hard for an 18-year-old not to like be like, I got into this place and now that is who I am. I mean, they're kids.
I think that it's something everyone has to discover. I don't think that it's something that you can really know as a 17-year-old applying to colleges, or even especially in my case, as a 13-year-old trying to get into high school somewhere. Which is another bonkers thing. Like the idea that I was like anxious and worried about a classical guitar audition as a 13-year-old kid is something I think about sometimes,
I moved to New York City and had to audition for, performing arts high schools. And like that, it is a weird ass time to try to hold yourself to that level of standard and pressure to have like full on professional adults tell you that you're not good enough to your face.
Well, and we like had, the things that I wanted to do, that I got excited about that were non-classical or whatever at the time. Now it seems like they're actually doing a little bit more non-classical stuff in the music school at UNCSA, but at the time,
maybe
it was pretty strictly classical, other than maybe the jazz band or stuff like that. But there was, I started, like, I was in a duo and we started writing music at like, in the middle of the night, because it was all the time we had, but it was very exciting because it was something we were like building on our own. And I think that there's a lot to be said for like finding ways to cultivate that individual artistry.
What did you guys do for intensive arts while you were there?
We didn't do, because intensive arts, especially for the musicians, was like a huge carve out for musicians. It had to be a nutcracker.
Right. If you weren't in that, what'd you do?
We were, as guitarists, we had a lot of just individual classes. Like we do some Alexander Technique stuff. They'd have guitarists, guest guitarists come in and give master classes and stuff, which was always one of my favorite things, like having them like fly in someone that was like an idol of mine. And I got to like play for them in this like tiny little 38 seat hall and get feedback from someone that I was like, every word you say is gold, you know?
Yeah, that's super cool.
A lot of it was very, it was basically just like all the stuff that we wish that we could offer that we can't all the time happens
right
now.
Exactly, we can get it for the weekend.
Yeah, which apparently I apparently intensive arts is very recently no more.
It's very different and mostly doesn't exist. Yeah, that's what it was explained to me. I think drama is one of the only ones left, which is it's such a drag because the drama's intensive arts is the intensive arts that everyone on campus should get. I don't know if you know anything about the way that it works.
I don't.
Dude. And maybe there's lots of people who are listening to this, especially from dance and music. I know we have a great number of listeners from that. Maybe you don't know about how it worked. And like I said, I usually don't talk too much about school, but I want to lay this out because I think it has tremendous value. And I think it's something that I don't even know if it exists this way anymore. But I wish I could do drama intensive arts every year, not even on school campus, like just with other artists, like this thing that I'm about to describe. So here's how it worked. Basis is that it's 2 weeks. It takes place in the first 2 weeks of December. It is after Thanksgiving. So there are performances and all that stuff, and everything is wrapped up before Thanksgiving for the when I started trimester, and then eventually the semester, whatever. So then we come back from holiday. We've had a little breather. You've gotten all your big shit out of the way. Nothing's due now. You're done. But you have 2 weeks of intensive arts. And for the 2 weeks, there are two things happening. The first thing is the thing that you described, which is like, we have some master classes. We took like ballroom dancing, something that we would never spend a whole semester on, like you said. But, clowning, some extra clowning classes. A guy from the circus came, shit like that. Just like what you said. That's during the day, but you're done at like 3 or 4 at the latest, maybe even 2 o'clock. You're like done for the day with those classes. Pretty minor. The other thing that's happening over this 2 weeks is essentially a massive 2-week theater festival that is essentially a fucking open mic.
Nice.
With a little bit of approval. Yeah. So only second, third, and fourth years may do a piece. And given where you are in the program, how many pieces you can do, stuff like that has changed many times throughout all the years. But
that's so cool.
For the first week and a half, it is rehearsals until the goddamn sun comes up. I mean, people work their ass off on these things. And I'm talking original musicals. I'm talking short plays, comedy scenes, clown sketches. I mean, it is like a classic, almost burlesque variety show theme, but it's like an open mic. Like I said, you have to submit to the faculty and they have to approve that you can do it. And you usually have a faculty member step in on a rehearsal once just to make sure it's not a total fucking train wreck and they don't have to cut it, which does happen.
Sure.
Also, the student directors run the festival. So it's a great producing experience as far as like getting things up on its feet, checking in. They have the second week mini tech for like a day. It takes all goddamn day. It's like a 20-hour day to tech all these pieces. There might be like 50 pieces. And they're presented over 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the second week. And it's all goddamn day. And it's exhausting because some of these pieces are like, hey, fun clowns playing banjo. And then the next piece is like a 25-minute thing where someone comes out and does a one-woman show about a terrible thing that happened to them when they were a kid. And it's this beautiful visual musical thing and everyone's crying. And then back to clowns. It is so overstimulating also. When you go home for the 2 weeks of break, it's like all the fuck you can think about because you have to decompress from all the like stuff that just happened.
Just got like loaded. Yeah.
And it took me almost a couple of years of being on campus, because I actually started in DMP, but it took me a couple of years to realize that with Nutcracker, that first of all, that's where drama intensive arts was born in the vacuum of, because that was why intensive arts existed in the first place, was because Nutcracker was happening. A lot of students had to do it, but then a lot of other students had fucking nothing to do, and drama has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we'll do this little theater festival. The intellectual properties that are born in those 2 weeks, holy shit, that would go on to become real films, plays, pieces, bands that get formed in that 2 weeks that then go on to like, fuck drama, we're a band now. Stuff gets born in that. And I always thought that it was such a fucking crime that not every artist on campus got at least their own version or some participation in ours. Like, Jesus Christ, if the wig and makeup people could help us with that. Because we had no support. You know, you get like a block and a couch, and you got to make it out of that, because you get nothing, no lighting. You get like 4 lighting cues for your whole piece, no matter how long it is. It was almost like if you've ever done like a 48-hour film festival or so, it's like that kind of thing. And it's such a crunch, but you really, and this is the key, dude, this is kind of my whole response to the whole thing you said, which is like, you never had a chance to say, okay, thank you. This is the faculty speaking. Thank you for doing all of the fucking cookie cutter shit that we told you to do. And again, stop, back again, all goddamn semester.
Right.
What do you think?
Right.
What do you want to do?
Well, and like the resources, I think, of like saying like, you get to use, and I definitely underutilized that in grad school, because Yale had a lot of those where you could check out cameras and stuff, and you could like reserve spaces. Cool. There was a recording studio you could reserve, and like, I think there's more of that at UNCSA now too. But like, just giving people the resources of being like, look, here's a lot of classes. We're trying to make you as good as you can possibly be. Also,
make stuff.
Go for it. You know, here's some resources. Like, mess up. You know, like make mistakes. Screw up now while it doesn't matter and you're not getting paid for it, and it's like, nobody cares. That you're not like paralyzed with fear the first time you try to release, in my case, a record. Yeah. Because you've never, you know, I mean, the first non-classical record I ever contributed to, the songs that I wrote were settings of poetry, because I was so terrified of writing lyrics that I like stole, you know, I like took, well, stole's a strong word, it was public domain, but I like took Alfred Lord Tennyson poetry and said it, because I was like, it was something I was so self-conscious about, because I like hadn't really done a lot of like poetry or prose in that way, of this like artistic statement, other than like, you know, essays that I wrote for English classes. So like giving people the opportunities and the resources to do that kind of thing is just like, it's such, I think maybe that's the solution to like combat some of the rigidity, is to just like also separately say, here's stuff to use, have fun, you know?
And it feels like I said, it feels like a thank you for trusting us on that other shit. Yeah. Like, because it feels like they're giving it back to you and saying, yeah, believe me, we know you don't always want to fucking always get it. Like, here you go. Like, because we relate.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this, it's this admission of like, because I think there is a lot of pressure of like, I don't know how the other schools necessarily felt, but at least for the music school, it felt like every second that you were not practicing, you should be practicing. Like, there's no, like, if you were hanging out watching TV on your couch, you're wasting time that you should be practicing.
Falling behind.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was this like, and if you didn't want to, like, you know, there were days that I was like, I don't really want to play guitar today. And I was like, am I like a fraud for not always being very, very excited about playing guitar all the time? And you had to like sit with your own humanity of like, this is not a thing that anyone is supposed to be able to do. Like, the fact that I'm doing it a lot is crazy to begin with. Like, this is an extremely, you know, one of your legs is up on a stool. Like, I had back problems in high school and had to like switch the way that I sat. Like, this is an extremely strange thing to be doing as a person in the world. Like,
you know what I really like about you? I want to give you a compliment, because I feel like it's a rare quality. I feel like you do a great job in the mountain that we're all climbing of life and skill and whatever, right? You do a great job of, at least at this point in your life, I just met you today.
Sure.
But it's like people spend a lot of time climbing, which is what we're all hopefully doing. Hopefully you just don't set up camp and give up and get stagnant. But if you're climbing in life and you're trying to get better at a skill or successful in your career, whatever, relationship, it's like you're always climbing. You're always looking up. You're like, oh, I could be that. I could do that. Oh, and I hope I get to this. And I hope I get better at that. And you're like going up and up and up and up, which is great. But every fucking now and then, for perspective, you got to be like, whoa, I'm high up.
Oh, I used to.
You seem great at that.
I was a TA for the oral skills listening class in the music school. And I used to do that for students where they would get really, like, the teacher, David Winkleman, was really, really good at keeping the pace of the class right at the edge of where the student's ability was. So it was always doable, but challenging. It was really, he was awesome at it. But like, what it meant is that they always felt like they were barely able to do it. And the consideration wasn't necessarily made that like they were getting better because the pace of the class was moving. So they would be halfway through their second year of the class and be like, I don't know why I still can't do this stuff. And I would flip back in the book and just be like, do that one right now. And they would do it flawlessly. And I would be like, that's the thing you struggled with last year. Like, you are getting better. It's just, there's no like concession. No one's saying out loud, like, hey, it is also getting harder. Like, the thing that you wanted to do 2 years ago, it's easy for you now. So it's not what you want to do anymore. You want to do that now, and it's in front of you. But like, you can feel behind if you don't realize that you are making progress.
You got to check in with that. And you have to, sometimes you need someone to do it for you. But I really feel like it's a good skill set. Like, you seem to have developed, where it's like, I'm starting to feel like tired. I'm starting to feel like exhausted from the climb, and my arms are sore. And it's like, first of all, your arms are sore because you're climbing. A lot of people don't fucking climb at all. So that's something. And then second, while you're resting, take a look around and see how high up you are. And that, I have to say, is one of the reasons why I don't delete anything I make. I try to save everything. I don't revisit stuff a lot, but every now and then I go back to stuff I made. And I mean everything. A play I wrote, a rap I did, or whatever stupid thing I was trying to make. And I'm always making shit. I've always been like that. And I try to save everything. And I go back, and most of the time I'm like, glad this isn't out. Like, Jesus, God.
But even
but it's because I know how much farther along I've gotten. And every now and then I discover something old that I'm like, this is going to be fucking bad. And I'm like, I don't hate this.
I'll be damned. Well, I think the funniest thing to me is like, when I put out my first record when I was, I guess it was 2016, I think, when it was finally released. I'd recorded it over a period of time, but it was a classical guitar record that.
Do you want to plug it? Can people find it? Is it like
it's called Scordatura? Yeah, it's on all the streaming stuff. It was all in different alternate tunings, and I was very, I was terrified. And I haven't made a classical record since. I've made other records, but like, I was terrified to put anything out because I hadn't, and I felt like this was going to be this like seminal thing, and I didn't want people to like judge me, and I didn't feel like I was good enough. And I had a teacher, Michael Kadirka, told me like, you're always going to go, in a couple of years, I'll be good enough to do this. Like, there's no time in your life that you're ever going to look back on you 3 years ago and not go, I'm better now than I was then. Like, so you, if you think like that, you're just never, ever going to record anything. So that's true. I think you're good enough to do it. You should do it. And then you might think it's stupid later, but who cares? Like, you have to let go of this, like, this fear that people are going to judge you for the things that, for the instrumental music that you're putting out, like, that was written by other people in that case. But
absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really crucial, and this is like right alongside that, it's like a parallel to that, which is have faith in yourself. If you've practiced the skill of creation and of whatever field it is, guitar, comedy, whatever, have some faith that you are, as a craftsperson, an endless fountain.
Yeah.
Like, And that's why people used to tell me when I was doing stand up and like, especially in the open mic game, like no one knows who the fuck you are. And people will be like, oh, I heard someone do your joke. Like they stole that joke from you. And they would be like, aren't you pissed at them or whatever? And I was like, I don't fucking care. Like steal the joke. I don't give a shit. You know why? Because if I'm only as good as my one joke or some joke, then I'm a piece of shit comedian. Like I'll write a fucking 1,000 jokes. Yeah, that'll bury that one that you stole. And so taking one from me is meaningless. Like I really don't care. And I think it's this, you have to have a little bit of that arrogance. Like it's one of the reasons why I love hip hop, because almost every hip hop artist, even if you've never heard of them, is like, I'm the motherfucking greatest. And I'm like, I relate to like, even if you don't really feel that way in your art, there is a little bit of like fake it till you make it. Like go hard, make a bold choice.
Well,
do
and
the
I
fucking
think
thing.
that like being like, at least in my case, like I was saying before, like if you are trying to be, you know, quote unquote the best, and you're chasing what everyone else you think is also chasing, which is like this perfection that doesn't really exist, then you're going to be self-conscious and you're going to be worried about people judging you. But if you're like chasing a thing that you're excited about, you know, when you've hit it, and then you can release that, and it's beautiful. And it's sometimes you're never going to get quite there. I've sat on, I mean, the last record that I put out with Early Grey was like, we sat on it for a year over the pandemic going, it needs to be, and we finally just were like, we have to let this go. It has to just come out. We can't do this anymore. Like we did half of it in a bedroom when there was a plague. Like it just needs to be not here anymore.
Release.
And like, and we're not going to not release it, you know, so just do it. And then, you know, start working on other stuff. And so it's funny because every time I put out a record, I think I figured it out now. I can like, I'm not worried about it anymore. And then I start making the next one and I do the same thing again, where I'm like, that's not quite, it needs more, that we're missing like this level of frequency. Maybe I'd like add like a, you know, or something there, or change the form. I don't think it's working, whatever it is, which is great. But at a certain point you have to kind of go like, there is no real perfect, like your head is way too deep in this at this point. Everyone you've shown it to has only said good things about it. And there are people you've shown it to who would absolutely tell you if it needed work.
Exactly
so,
right.
Like, just like trust.
Believe.
Well, yeah, it's like suspending your own like disbelief about your own work and trying to kind of. I mean, that classical record, I didn't listen to it when I released it. I didn't listen to it again for years and years.
Yeah, sure.
And then like 6 months ago, I was at my parents' house and my dad started playing it. And I was like, who is this? And he was like, this is your record. And I was like, that's not so bad. I don't know why I was so worried. I mean, it's not the most incredible thing I've ever heard, but it's fun.
Good. Who is it?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like that. I was like, why are you playing classical guitar music? Like,
right.
And he was like, this is because
I love you.
Yeah, exactly. Because really, I think he was just like trying to see how long he could play it before.
Yeah, get away.
I noticed, which like 3 notes in, I was like, what is that? You know?
Right.
But yeah, it was, and that's normally something I can't stand doing, especially if I'm singing on the record. It's like, please turn it off. I don't want to hear like what I was afraid of hearing, you know, when I was making the record.
Drake, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, dude. This is super fun.
Of course.
We gotta wrap it up, but man, so many cool things I had no idea we would talk about. This is very, very interesting.
Me too. It just flowed very well.
It was wonderful.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the invite.
Of course. And do you have any other plugs? This will be out in just a couple of weeks. It'll be out in like December. I don't know if you have anything coming out or performing anything or anything.
I don't have anything coming out right now. I've got, you know, my music is under Drake Duffer on wherever you can stream. My duo Early Grey, Early with a Y, Grey with an A, has a few records out as well.
Oh yeah.
Also wherever music is on the digital world.
I love it. Whatever you're listening to this on, you're likely to be able to find Drake Duffer's music. So please go get it, stream it, download it. If there's any way that you can buy it, fucking buy it.
Yeah.
Thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. See you soon.